What is up, Math Superstars? In this edition of Mr. Peterson Presents, we're going to be talking about the steps in making circle graphs. But before we get started, we have some useful information. So first part of useful information is a graph that is used to compare part to the total. It is called a circle graph. And so we're looking at the ratio. We're taking the total number. So typically it might be a survey, but it might be out of money. Whatever that total is, we're going to break it up into parts to represent different things about the total. The circle graph can also include percentages, so percents. And there are 360 total degrees in a circle. And so the way I think about this is that if you want to get a great view of something, we're looking for a 360 degree view, which is you stand in the middle and you spin yourself around to see everywhere until you get back to the beginning. That's 360 degrees. And in a circle graph, when you add up all the percentages, they are going to equal 100%. So here, let's go ahead and take a look at some data here. So this person, they figured out favorite sports of different people. And we got to figure out what the total number of people that were surveyed here. And so let's go ahead and count up our tally marks. So for baseball, there were 5, 10 people that chose baseball. Soccer, there were 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So all I'm doing is counting the tally marks. So I can see that there are 30 people that chose soccer. And then football is 5, 10, 15, 20 people chose football. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add up those three totals. And when you add them up, it gives you 60 total people that were surveyed. So that's the very first step in making a circle graph. Next up is we need to figure out what the ratio is. So the ratio, we're going to write all of these ratios as fractions. So we're going to take the part is going to be the numerator, and everything is going to be out of our total, which is 60. And so here I can write baseball as 10 out of 60. And then if I simplify it, so I simplify by dividing the top and bottom by 10, I can write that fraction as 1 out of 6, or 1/6. So I can say that 1/6 of all the people that were selected, all the people that took the survey, 1/6 of them chose baseball. So what about soccer here? So soccer is going to be, we took 30s is going to be our numerator. The total is going to be our denominator. So I have 30 out of 60. And when I simplify that, it simplifies all the way down to 1/2. So I can say that half the people in this survey chose soccer. And then how about football? So football is, I'm taking the part, is going to be in the numerator. So it's 20 out of 60. I can simplify that to 1/3. And so what you can know here in the total category is that you should have a fraction when you add up these fractions. 10 over 60, 30 over 60, 20 over 60 should equal 60 out of 60, which then simplifies to 1/1. Let's talk about how we can figure out the decimal. So for the decimal, 1 out of 6, so you can type in your calculator 1 divided by 6 in your calculator, and it will give you the decimal 0, and it will say 1/6666666, and it'll repeat. So I'm going to round it up to the nearest thousandths place here for my rounding. So I can say that for baseball, the decimal is going to be 0 and 167 thousandths. So how about soccer here? So I did 1 divided by 2 in the calculator, or you can just know that that decimal is 0 and 5/10. And I'm just going to keep going here with football. If I hit 1 divided by 3 in the calculator, it's going to give me the repeating decimal 0 and 3, and the 3 is going to repeat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to round that up to the nearest thousandths place. So I can say that 1 divided by 3 is going to be really, really close to 0 and 333 thousandths. And so you guessed it, when I add all of those numbers up, I should get somewhere really, really close to 1 whole. So when you do the decimals, and if it comes out to 0 and 995 thousandths, you're pretty close. and that's okay, because we want you to be super close to this number of 1. So talking about the percents, we got to remember that the percent is going to be 100%. So we're going to use that total. So the total is always going to be 100% in making some calculations to figure out what the percents are going to be. And so what you can do in your calculator is you can take the decimal that you just did, and if you multiply that by 100, 100% is going to give you the percent. And so I can say that the percent of people that chose baseball is 16 7/10%. So I can keep doing the same thing. So soccer, I took my decimal times 100, giving me 50%. So just how I said that 1/2 of the people chose soccer, I can say that 50% of the people chose soccer. So I'm saying the same thing, just using some different terms. And then for football, I'm taking that decimal, multiplying by 100. So I have 33 3/10% of the people chose football. So what about degrees here? So in order to figure out degrees, I know that in my total circles it comes out to 360 degrees. So very similar to the way we did percent, we're going to figure out degrees. So degrees is going to be the decimal, and I'm going to do the decimal times 360. So I'm going to figure out what part of 360 degrees is going to be the baseball portion of the circle graph. So I can say that 60 degrees is going to be the baseball portion if I measure the angle. So then I can do the same thing. 0 5/10 times 360 is 180 degrees, and 0 333 thousandths is going to give me about 120 degrees. And so when you do these, your total should come out, when you add up all the degrees, it should come out to 360 degrees. Now, if you're really close, if it's 357.8 degrees, you're really close. It means that you just rounded your decimals. So now we actually have to create the circle graph from our data here. And so some things we need to fill in before we start coloring in our circle graph. We need to give this circle graph a title. So the title is going to be favorite sports. And then we need to have a color key here. So this is going to tell us, if we look at the graph, we can identify part of it with the color here. And so baseball is going to be in green. We have soccer going to be in blue. And then we have football that's going to be in orange. And so the next step is that we realize that our biggest denominator has 6 parts to it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to cut our circle graph into 6 equal parts, just like this. So for the sake of your notes, you want to be as accurate and precise as possible. So your circle graph needs to be cut into pieces that are pretty similar to this. Next up is we want to get the fractions that we used when we figured out the ratio. And so baseball, we know that baseball was 1/6. We know the soccer was 1/2, and we know that football was 1/3 here. And so what we have to do is we have to make all the fractions out of 6 to be easier. So to get, for soccer, 1/2 would be 2 times 3, would give me 6. So I can multiply the numerator by 3 to give me 3. And then for football, if I need to get a denominator out of 6, so I can do 3 times 2 gives me 6. And then 1 times 2 is going to be 2. So I can see that I can figure out now how many of the 1/6 pieces I need to actually color in. So baseball, we're going to color in 1/6. So you can see I'm just picking my color green. And now I've colored in 1/6 of my circle graph to represent that portion being baseball. So now for soccer, I need to color in 3 pieces. So I need to color in half of my circle graph for soccer. So all my friends that love soccer, let's go ahead and color in those pieces. You want to make sure that when you're coloring in, try to stay inside the lines. I know some of you are outside the lines types of thinkers. But then we have football here. So football is going to be 2/6. So let's go ahead and color in 2/6 pieces here. So now I made my circle graph here, so I can see that 1 out of 6 pieces is baseball, 3 out of 6 is soccer, and 2 out of 6 is football. So now we're given this type of question. The students were asked which fruit they liked the most, and the results are shown here in our lovely circle graph. And the question that it was asked is that which table represents the data in the graph here. And so let's go ahead and take a look at the circle graph, and we're going to label these parts from the biggest part all the way down to the smallest part. So here you have bananas being the biggest part. So I'm going to label that with a number 1. Bananas are number 1. Strawberries are number 2. And then oranges are number 3, and apples coming in dead last. And so here you have to pick the table in which bananas, the order from biggest to smallest would be bananas, strawberries, oranges, and apples. And let's take a look at all of our different options here. And so let's take a look at letter A. That's always a good place to start because that's the first letter in the alphabet. And so let's take a peek here. And so does it have bananas as the biggest? So bananas would be number 1. And then it will have strawberries at number 2. And then oranges at number 3. And then apples being dead last. Does that order match? Thankfully, this order matches so letter A should be our answer. But in going through the rest of them, what you can do is that if bananas are not listed as number 1, you can cross it out. So let's take a look at letter B. So we'll take a look at all these answer choices here. So letter B has strawberries listed as number 1. So that one's a goner. Let's take a look at letter C. Letter C has oranges at number 1, and oranges was 3rd, so that doesn't match. And then letter D also had oranges at number 1. And so you can just kind of go through, label the order from biggest to smallest, and then figure out which table matches that.